The dark truth, why Paul said he was a slave at 3 a.m. Shocking revelation that will haunt you. In the quiet stillness of the night, with only the moonlight spilling through the windows, Paul sat up in bed, his heart racing. It wasn't just a bad dream. The shadows danced across the walls, whispering his name, and for a split second, he felt the cold grip of fear wrap around his throat. At 3 a.m., the world outside seemed a forgotten memory, but inside that little room, reality twisted into something darker. Paul struggled against the invisible chains that tightened with each passing moment, feeling as if he were trapped in some otherworldly prison. Why would he utter the word slave? The truth began to creep in, sharper than a knife. Paul had uncovered something sinister: his own family history. Documents, buried deep in the attic, told tales of ancestors bound by more than just blood. They were slaves in a not-so-distant past, their lives twisted by the hands of others. The air felt heavy, thick with the weight of secrets that had festered unnoticed. "I can't believe it," he whispered, the words grazing his lips like a ghostly caress. With every flicker of the candlelight, the shadows morphed, revealing faces, memories of suffering. Things started to unravel when Paul pieced together old family photographs, faces lined with despair, yet there lingered a spark of resilience. It felt like they were watching him, warning him. With clenched fists, he hesitated. Did he dare to dig deeper? He needed to know, but as he scanned those haunting images, the chill of something unknown washed over him. Who were these people? What other truths swirled just out of reach? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The night deepened as the clock struck 4. Shadows now danced wildly, their movements more frantic, like caged animals desperate for freedom. Paul could hear distant echoes, whispers of his ancestors filling the silence, pleading for acknowledgement. Each heartbeat thundered in his ears as the chilling thought struck him: was he really meant to uncover this darkness, or was it better left buried? His thoughts spiraled as the weight of his discovery pressed down on him, begging him to confront the storm brewing deep inside. Suddenly, the room grew colder. A sudden thought flashed: what if the past wasn't just history? What if it reached out, seeking vengeance through him? With trembling hands, Paul reached for the attic's dusty latch, questioning everything, his heart hammering as he prepared to unveil even more. What lay ahead in those hidden boxes? What else would he find that could turn his understanding of his own soul upside down? Each passing second felt like a countdown to revelation. A dark truth loomed just beyond, waiting to drag him in. Would he ever be the same after this? The wooden latch creaked eerily as Paul opened the attic door, sending a shiver down his spine. Dust motes floated in the dim light, and the air was thick with the scent of aged memories. He stepped inside, heart pounding like a war drum, urging him to escape the tide of darkness threatening to pull him under. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled. What awaited him in the shadows? The space was cluttered, filled with forgotten relics wrapped in sorrow. He leaned in closer, trying to make sense of the chaos. Boxes piled high, some old and weathered, others surprisingly new, held the remnants of lives long past. With hesitant movements, he dragged a box closer, its weight promising burdens yet to be uncovered. As he pried it open, an overwhelming wave of sorrow washed over him. Inside lay a collection of letters, carefully folded, their paper yellowed with age, stained with tears and memories. He could almost feel their desperation seeping through the ink, as if the souls behind the words still lingered, urging him to listen. With bated breath, he unfolded the first letter. The penmanship was shaky, filled with raw emotion. It detailed the harrowing journey of his great-great-grandfather, bound in chains, trapped in a world of unthinkable horror. The words leaped off the page: fear, longing for freedom, and an unyielding spirit fighting against the oppressive grip of destiny. Paul's heart ached as he read line after line, each one carving deeper into his soul, setting a fire of rage and sorrow aflame inside him. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the attic. A chill pierced the air, and Paul's heart stopped. Breathing heavily, he spun around, eyes darting through the darkness. "Hello," he called out, voice shaking, swallowed by the silence. The shadows consumed every corner. Every instinct told him he wasn't alone. Pressing on, he tried to ground himself in the letters, seeking refuge in the pain of his ancestors. But the whispers grew louder, intertwining with the crackling tension in the room. He flipped through more letters, desperate for answers, for clarity. With each one he uncovered, he felt more connected yet more suffocated. Each tale of struggle and anguish mirrored the chains he felt binding him to the past. Just as he began to grasp the weight of their pain, a faint glimmer caught his eye. Beneath a pile of dusty blankets was an old wooden chest, impossibly ornate, almost calling for him. His pulse thundered in his ears as he approached, each step an echo in that vast emptiness. Slowly, he knelt before the chest, fingers trembling as he reached for the latch. With a swift tug, it opened, revealing a collection of items: a tarnished locket, a dagger, and a bone handle with intricate carvings. It looked like something ancient, something that shouldn't exist. The moment he touched the handle, a vision exploded in his mind: flashes of torment, shouts of defiance, and shadows of chains that rattled as they disappeared into the dark. He gasped, the images too overwhelming, too vivid. What had he stumbled upon? The connection to his ancestors was far deeper than he had imagined, and the echoes of their souls were undeniably entwined with his own. His breath quickened, panic crept back in as he processed what he had unearthed. This wasn't just history. It was a curse. The past bore down heavily, and Paul could feel its grip tightening once again like a chain around his own throat. As he snapped back to reality, the attic door slammed shut behind him, plunging him into inky blackness. Alone, surrounded by whispers, he realized he had awakened something. What would they seek from him now? The grip of shadows closed in, and Paul's thoughts raced. What if he was the next to be shackled not in chains, but by the truth of his own blood? What did that chest truly hold, and would it unveil the destiny he was trying to escape? With a gut-wrenching crisis looming at his doorstep, he was left with a question burning in his mind: could he face the truth, or would it consume him entirely? The darkness wrapped around Paul like a heavy blanket, suffocating and unyielding. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting into grotesque forms that loomed just out of sight. His breath came fast and shallow, and he felt the weight of the attic pulling him deeper into its abyss. That he backed away from the chest, eyes wide, heart racing. The only source of light filtered weakly through a small attic window, casting faint beams that barely pierced the thick darkness. Shadows slithered like live creatures, creeping toward him with intent. "Stay away from me!" Paul shouted, desperate to reclaim his space. But his voice hung in the air, dissipating into silence, as if the attic itself swallowed his words. The whispers began again. This time, they were louder, more insistent. He strained to catch the words, realizing they were not just echoes of the past, they were warning shots. "Find us," they pleaded, urgent and filled with anguish. Paul's mind raced. He needed to escape. He fumbled for the door, but it stood solidly shut, as if it had morphed into a wall, preventing his escape. Panic surged, and he turned back to the chest, feeling an undeniable pull, a compulsion to confront whatever it held inside. With a shaky resolve, he drew closer, letting the moment wash over him. What would he find? Friends? Enemies? Sins long forgotten? Each item was a fragment of a life, a tormented legacy begging for acknowledgement. That he grabbed the locket first, its surface cool and smooth against his palm. With a click, it opened to reveal a faded photograph of a woman. Her sad eyes seemed to follow him, a silent plea to understand her suffering. "Who are you?" he whispered, half hoping for a reply. The tension in the room thickened, making it difficult to breathe. The whispers morphed, giving way to a sharp, piercing shriek that rattled every bone in his body. Paul stumbled back, dropping the locket. It clanked hollowly against the floor, shattering stillness into chaos. "Find us, break the chain," the voices echoed, a collective cry that chilled his blood. Then, unmistakably, a shadow flickered in the corner of his vision. Paul whirled around, heart hammering, but met only the relentless gloom. He shook his head, desperately attempting to dispel the fear that gripped him. "What do you want from me?" he cried out, knowing the attic was alive with history, but not ready to accept its demands. That he could feel the handle's chilling remnant still in his grasp, the energy pulsing beneath his fingertips. The moment he closed his eyes, visions returned, eyes staring in horror, chains rattling, hearts that once beat in anguish. A family tree rooted deep in sorrow seemed to rise in his mind, branches heavy with pain. Then suddenly, a crack of another sound jerked him from his thoughts like a door creaking open. Was it his escape? Relief surged through him, but shifted to unease, as he pivoted toward the sound. The dim light flickered precariously, casting erratic shadows that stretched across the room. "Come find the truth," the voices whispered again, this time more insistent. Clenching his jaw, Paul moved to steady himself. He was not just confronting mere memories, he was embroiled in a war waged long before his time, a battle for understanding, for redemption. As the attic lights flickered once more, Paul felt an undeniable certainty ignite within him. He was meant to fight not only for himself but for the ghosts who had lingered far too long. He could no longer stand on the sidelines, wondering. But the scariest thought crept in just then: what new horrors would he unlock once the truth was unshackled? And as warmth began to suffuse his veins, he wondered, is the truth worth the darkness it brings? It was a risk he had to take, but would he be strong enough to face the consequences? The air hung heavy with desperation, the whispers clamoring in Paul's mind. As he stood there, teetering on the brink of understanding, a chilling thought bleakly flashed through him. What if the truths lurking in this attic weren't just ghostly echoes but pieces of his own fragmented reality? He leaned against the chest, needing something solid to ground him. The cool wood felt alive, almost pulsating under his touch. His heart raced as he glanced at the locket lying in pieces on the floor. What had he released? "Find us," the voices seemed to blend into a low hum, an insistent chant that resonated with the very fibers of his being. No, Paul shook his head. Not like this. But the room around him shimmered, the shadows shifting and swirling with newfound intent, as if daring him to disregard their call. The air grew thick, almost electric, and suddenly, his memories flashed like a projector gone haywire. A child, shackled and frightened, cowered in a dimly lit basement. He saw the faces of his family, grotesque in their despair. He felt the sting of betrayal and the weight of grief crash over him, washing his resolve away like sand into the sea. Break the chain. The words sliced through the chaos, sharp as glass. A parody of his childhood flashed before his eyes, his childhood filled with nightmares he'd buried deep. Suddenly, a figure emerged at the attic door, silhouetted in flickering shadows. Paul's breath hitched. The figure's face was obscured, cloaked in darkness, but there was something achingly familiar about their stance. Paul, a raspy whisper fell into the silence, echoing like a funeral dirge. "Who are you?" he shouted, feeling the fight rise in his chest. "I'm your link," the figure said, taking a step forward, exposing a face Paul longed to recognize. But the shadows clung desperately, obscuring their features. "Link to what?" Panic flickered in his voice. "Link to the truth," their voice cracked, trembling with the weight of unshed tears. "You have to let go of the past. Only then can you break free." A cruel laugh rattled from the depths of his memories, cold and mocking. Just as it crescendoed, the attic lights sputtered and whirled into darkness, plunging him into a state of blind terror. Every time he thought he had grasped the truth, the specter of fear dashed hopes against the jagged wall of reality. "Let go!" the eerie chant swelled once more, now a chorus of coiled voices surrounding him, drawing closer. He clamped his hands over his ears, a futile attempt to block them out. But the memories surged harder, knots of pain and regret pulling him down into their depths. No. He choked out, the walls seeming to close in around him, his fists clenched, knuckles white with strain. He had fought so long to keep these horrors at bay. Could it be true? Could he let them in? Just then, a stitch of light flickered on the estranged figure, illuminating their face with an ethereal glow. The brief flash unveiled a look of both love and desperation. Paul gasped, recognizing the tears streaming the contours of their face. "Help me before it's too late." The power of the plea resonated deep within Paul, igniting an ember of courage he did not know he possessed. But it came with a price he wasn't sure he could pay. "What do I have to do?" he whispered, trembling at the brink of decision. "You have to remember." The shadows converged violently, their faces twisting and contorting into grotesque masks of agony. Paul staggered backward, heart racing, an overwhelming swell of dread clawing at his chest. If he remembered, what new horrors would come crashing through this fragile barrier? Could he bear to confront the darkness he had buried for so long? Or was he destined to remain a prisoner of these shadows? As the figure raised a trembling finger toward the chest, Paul caught his breath, understanding dawning amidst the noise. The attic was alive with voices that had once been tethered to him, and it was time to turn the key in the lock of his past. "Open it," he muttered through clenched teeth, dread weaving tightly around his thoughts. What lay behind the chest's heavy lid? Would it unveil the freedom he craved or plunge him into depths even darker than before? The choice loomed before him, imminent and inescapable. Paul's heart thundered as he reached for the latch. With a trembling hand, Paul gripped the latch. His fingers tingled as if the metal itself were charged with the energy of the voices around him. Every instinct screamed to turn away, to leave the chest sealed and buried beneath layers of dust and history. But the sound of whispered pleas insisted otherwise. The figure before him, their familiar features still just out of reach, was urging him on with a desperate intensity. "Open it," the figure urged again, a plea wrapped in a shroud of desperation. The weight of the moment crashed down on him, suffocating and persistent. He could feel his heart pounding in his throat, the fear wrapped around his chest like a vice. What if the thought flickered like a dying candle? What if he unleashed something that would shatter him? But the fear of what he might find inside was eclipsed by the terror of remaining trapped in this room, in this cycle of reminiscence and despair. He exhaled shakily and pulled the latch. A creaking protest echoed through the attic as the lid lifted, drawing back like a curtain on the stage of his nightmares. Inside, tangled remnants lay hidden: stray photographs, old letters, and splintered toys. A chill raced down his spine as he recognized each item as parts of a persona he had struggled to forget. But it was the central object, a small wooden box, that beckoned him forward like the eye of a storm. He reached for it, feeling an odd warmth radiating from the polished surface. The second it touched his palm, a jolt surged through him, visions flashing like lightning. A squalid basement. He was back there, a child once more, tied to memories coated in layers of terror. The shadows loomed large, twisting into figures he couldn't quite make out. Each time he blinked, they shifted, morphing into faces of people he had loved and lost. "Paul," the raspy whisper echoed again, sending a shiver up his spine. "You must see." "I don't want to," he yelled, his voice breaking as he fought against the onslaught of recollections. Yet the box was irresistible, caging truths he had buried beneath years of denial and repression. There was no retreat, he was already too deep in the tide of the past to break free. "Remember," the whisper thickened, growing louder. "Remember why you're here." With trembling fingers, he flipped open the box. Inside lay a stack of brittle letters wrapped in yellowed string. He hesitated, heart thundering like a wild drum, before lifting the top sheet. The moment he read the first words, devastation curled into his gut. "Dear Paul," it began, the ink blurred with age. "We miss you. The darkness isn't your fault." He felt the world tilt at the edges, memories of laughter and happiness bubbling up. Then gloom descended, heavy and suffocating. It felt like a floodgate had burst open, relenting to secrets he had kept bottled for too long. "Stop!" he screamed, slamming the box shut, but the shadows around him surged forward, merging into a cacophony of cries. "Please, just let me be." Paul the figure's voice cut through, filled with compassion. The shadows recoiled slightly, as if respecting the turmoil within him. "You must face them. You must face yourself." "Why?" he gasped, his voice cracked and trembling. "Why now?" "Because you can't heal without breaking the chains that bind you. It's time to confront your truth," they urged. A suffocating pressure weighed down on him. The darkness loomed around, thick and breathing, as he faced the reality that had haunted him since childhood. "Let go," they whispered, the chorus of voices returning, echoing sweetly in his ears. With a newfound resolve, Paul opened the wooden box again. What would he uncover? His hands trembled as he picked up the letters once more. But behind him, a sudden thud echoed from the door, sending a shockwave of dread shooting through him. The figure moved to step away, shadows splitting like curtains to reveal a hidden doorway, one he had never noticed. "Run!" they shouted, urgency flooding their tone. As Paul stood frozen, his mind swirling with fear and confusion, the door creaked ominously, the outline of danger poised to spill forth. What hunted him now? Would he defy his fate once again? The flicker of hope wrestled with dread in his heart. "Run!" The figure's voice turned stark, snapping him from his stupor. Paul turned toward the looming shadows that churned at the door. They were hungry, seeking. With the weight of the past and the unknown crashing upon him, Paul took a deep breath, ready to dive into the darkness that awaited. Could he really escape his fate? Or would he finally face the truth hidden in the shadows? Panic surged through Paul. He didn't need a second invitation. He bolted toward the newly revealed doorway, heart racing and mind spinning. The shadows behind him rippled like water disturbed by a stone, dark tendrils reaching out, hungry for a taste of his fear. "Keep moving," the figure urged, their voice rising over the chaotic din. The warmth of the box slipped through his fingers, forgotten in the face of impending danger. The shadows echoed with a growl, a sound that felt primal and ancient, vibrating the very air around him. The hidden doorway was tight, barely allowing him to squeeze through, but he shoved his shoulders against the frame, pushing onward into the unknown. The figure stood behind him, a flicker of light against the consuming dark. "I'll hold them back. Go." He turned for just an instant, catching a glimpse of desperation on their face, and the shadows swirled closer, a visceral tide of loss and anger. With a jolt, Paul burst through, tumbling into a small, dimly lit corridor. The air was cold and stale, filled with whispers that tangled around his ankles like smoke. The walls were lined with faded photographs, remnants of lives intertwined with his own images of happiness that twisted into grim reminders of how fleeting joy could be. One picture grabbed his attention. There he was, a small boy with innocent eyes, beaming with a smile. He reached out, hesitant to touch it, but when he did, an electric shock coursed through him. Memories flooded in, laughter at a sunlit park, the warm grip of a hand that once promised safety. But they were quickly followed by darker thoughts, a shadow lurking in the background, anxiety gripping his chest, something sinister lurking behind the laughter. It sent him reeling back, falling to the ground. "Paul!" The figure's voice echoed faintly, a reminder that he wasn't alone. "You have to remember. It's all connected." He stumbled to get back on his feet, heart pounding in his ears as the corridor seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. The only light came from the end where he could hear the muffled whispers growing louder, drowning out everything else. It was as if the hallway held secrets, teasing him with their allure while warning him of the danger. "Why won't it end?" he uttered, shaking his head, teeth gritted against the flood of emotions clashing within him. "Because you need to set the truth free." The urgency in the figure's voice wrapped around him like a lifeline, pulling him forward. "You cannot run from what you are. You're meant to confront it." A thrill of determination cut through his fear. The whispers now morphed into a cacophony of anguish and hope, twining together as if urging him onward, promising liberation on the other side of dread. Paul broke into a run, feet pounding against the floor, heart racing as he reached the end of the corridor. Just beyond, he saw a door glowing faintly, flickering like fireflies in summer. It beckoned to him with a sense of familiarity, yet shadows clung to its edges like old scars. He placed his hand on the doorknob, feeling an overwhelming sense of gravity tugging at him. Memories surged, faces begged for acknowledgement, voices called his name, urging for release. Was he ready to confront whatever lay beyond? The whispers crescendoed, then fell to silence. With a deep breath, Paul turned the knob, his heartbeat echoing a primal rhythm as he pushed the door open. Light spilled forth, and he stepped into a room he half remembered, his soul caught between fear and hope. What truths awaited him in that well of light? Would this moment be his salvation or his undoing? As he crossed the threshold, darkness swirled behind him, creeping forward. Would he emerge whole or shatter into pieces? As Paul stepped into the light, it enveloped him like a warm blanket, but there was an unsettling familiarity that made his skin crawl. The room was spacious and neatly arranged, yet the walls were painted in a sickly shade of green that felt almost suffocating. In the center, an old wooden table was laid out with curious objects, dream catchers, tarnished keys, and a small tin box, all positioned as if awaiting his arrival, as if the room itself had been waiting for him for years. A chill prickled the back of his neck. He could feel the shadows gathering at the door, pressing against the threshold as if trying to force their way inside. He turned to close the door, but it slammed shut behind him. The sound echoed like a thunderclap, reverberating through the room. Panic clawed at his throat, but he forced himself to breathe. Focus, he whispered to himself, remembering the figure's words. Set the truth free. He approached the table, heart racing. The tin box caught his eye, and he couldn't resist the urge to open it. His fingers trembled as he lifted the lid. Inside, nestled like forgotten treasures, were crumpled scraps of paper. As he unfolded them, a shiver ran down his spine. The words began to form before his eyes, their meanings flickering like candles on a stormy night. Run. Hide. Trust no one. These were frantic scribbles, messages from a person teetering on the precipice of despair. Each word was stained with fear, resonating deep within him. They felt like echoes of his own thoughts swirling in a cyclone of anguish. His chest tightened, and the walls around him seemed to close in. He stumbled back, feeling the weight of despair upon every heartbeat, then he glanced up and saw her. A girl stood in the corner, her eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears, framed by strands of tangled hair. She was lost, just like him. Paul. Her voice was a haunting whisper, shivering in the air. You're here, at last. Who are you? How do you know me? The words burst out of him, full of confusion and fear. Everything is connected, she pleaded, taking a tentative step toward him, her figure shimmering in the light. You must remember. We were all part of this together. Another wave of memory crashed over him, but this time it was different. Unraveled threads of a dark childhood, shadows creeping off the edges of innocence, unveiled a tapestry woven with betrayal. Flashes of laughter intertwined with heart-wrenching screams filled his mind. Stay away. He shouted, backing up against the table, the tin box teetering dangerously at the edge. Please, don't shut me out. Her voice quavered, a blend of urgency and sorrow. The darkness wants to keep us apart. It feeds on your fear. A loud thud echoed as something heavy slammed against the door behind him. He jumped, heart pounding, eyes darting toward the sound. The shadows seeped through the cracks, hungry and desperate, while the girl's expression twisted with terror. You can't let it in, Paul. He looked back at the girl, her face a mirror of his own torment. Could he really face the darkness? Could he embrace the truth buried within? I don't know how, he whispered, doubt creeping into his heart. You just have to choose, she said softly. Choose to fight. But what if fighting meant confronting the monster he'd hidden from all his life? His gut twisted with dread. The shadow was reaching for him now, tendrils wrapping around his ankles, urging him to succumb to the fear. The flickering light above him dimmed, casting eerie shadows, and the girl faded into a wisp of smoke, her pained eyes bright against the encroaching darkness. "Remember, we're not alone," set the truth free just as her voice faded completely. The door shook violently, splinters of wood cracking under pressure. The choice loomed before him. Would he stay or would he fight? With a surge of determination, Paul stepped toward the encroaching darkness. What awaited him in that fight? Would the truth set him free or ensnare him forever? Paul felt the dark tendrils grasping his legs tighten, an icy grip that sent jolts of panic through him. He took a deep breath, struggling against the rising tide of fear. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but his feet remained rooted to the spot, fixation on the shadow swirling before him. Voices whispered from within the darkness, so tempting, so insidious. "Why don't you just let go?" they seemed to murmur. "It's easier that way." But then he saw her face again. The girl, her eyes wide like a frightened deer, yet glowing with a fierce kind of hope. "Fight!" she echoed in his mind, and something inside him stirred. What did he have to lose? Maybe this was his chance to rise from the ashes of his past. With a sudden surge of defiance, he swung his gaze toward the shadows, eyes narrowed, fists clenched. "No!" he shouted, voice cracking but loud enough to pierce the shroud of darkness. "You won't take me. I will face you." The shadows recoiled for a moment, giving him a brief glimpse of the room. The sickly green walls seemed to ripple like a living thing, pulsating with an unknown energy. Paul could feel a primal fear, undercurrents of something intensely sinister intertwined with every breath. Engaging the unknown, he stepped boldly forward, and as he did, the darkness swirled and writhed as if angered by his defiance. The murmurs transformed into a horrific cacophony, voices overlapping into a frenzied storm of laughter and cries that grew louder, drowning out everything. "Paul!" they shrieked. "You should have stayed hidden." But one thought blazed through his mind like a beacon: I am not alone. With determination coursing through his veins, he reached into the tin box. Grabbing a handful of crumpled notes, he hurled them into the dark void. The paper sparked as if igniting with unseen fire, casting strange shadows and illuminating the corners of the room. Each note released an echo of truth. "We were in this together," he murmured, voice steady. "I remember." The images surged forward, small hands gripping disparate memories, laughter in the face of danger, friendships forged in the fires of trials. The darkness recoiled, and he pressed on, feeding off the energy of recollection. "I won't forget what you did. I won't be your puppet any longer." The shadows twisted violently, their shapes distorting into grotesque figures, and Paul's heart thundered in his chest. Was he really ready for this? Could he banish them with just memories? Suddenly, a huge force crashed into the table, sending objects flying. The dream catchers clattered to the ground, their feathers spinning like lost souls. His heart raced as the shadows lunged. He ducked, narrowly avoiding a sharp edge that threatened to tear him apart. But just as he began to think he couldn't hold on, he felt a surge of strength in remembering the girl. "Together!" he shouted, reaching deep within, summoning a power he didn't know he had. He closed his eyes and imagined her standing beside him, courage radiating between them like a shield made of light. As he opened his eyes, the shadows recoiled again. A sudden burst of luminescence ignited from the box, blinding and overwhelming. For a heartbeat, he saw her just beyond the edge of reality. "You're not powerless, Paul," she called with warmth and conviction as the light grew louder. "Embrace the truth." Then came an earth-shattering roar, shaking the very foundation of the room. The darkness convulsed violently, as though it was alive. Ready to confront whatever horror lay ahead, Paul took a step closer, beckoning the light like it was his birthright. Would this moment of clarity cast the shadows away forever, or would the price of truth be too high? He could feel the certainty in his bones something was about to break. Would it be him, or the darkness? The blinding light erupted like a sun breaking through the darkness, engulfing Paul in warmth. For a moment, he felt the dread and despair melt away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of safety. But that feeling vanished in an instant as the darkness screeched, rallying against the light with an agonized howl that shook the very air around him. The shadows twisted, writhing and contorting as if in pain. Paul winced, gritting his teeth, heart pounding in his chest. "I won to let you win." He shouted again, clenching his fists tighter, feeling the heat from the tin box intensify. As the light pulsated, he began to notice the shapes of the shadows more clearly. They weren't just formless lumps of darkness but rather faces twisted, anguished visages that clawed at him with claw-like fingers. Recognition washed over him with a wave of nausea. These were people he once knew, faces from memories he had buried deep. Were they here to torment him, or were they lost souls looking for salvation? "Help us," one whispered, its voice like fragile glass, breaking under the weight of despair. He stepped backward instinctively, the sudden chill settling into his bones. "No. You're trying to trick me." The shadows laughed, a dry, hollow sound that echoed around him. "You've always been so weak, Paul. Look at you. You think you can wield something as pure as light against your own darkness. You will fail." Each laugh felt like icy fingers slicing through his resolve. He couldn't let that happen. Not after everything. Would all those memories flood back to drown him in regret? What about the girl's fierce hope? He tore his gaze away, focusing on the flickering light that remained steadfast. With each pulse, snippets of memories surged back, clearer now, days spent laughing, bonds forged through shared fears and joys. "You're in there with me," he yelled, throwing another crumpled note into the fray. "I won't forget you." Another burst of luminescence shot through the air, illuminating the room. The hideous shadows writhed, twisting as they absorbed his words like a sponge. Paul could tell he was gaining ground, but the fear still circled him, hungry and relentless. Suddenly, the cacophony of cries sharpened, becoming piercing. "You think you're saving them? You will only lose yourself." But amid the chaos, a sweet, soft voice broke through. "Paul." It was her again, stronger now, bursting through the haze of shadows. "Remember the laughter. The promise." He didn't fully understand but felt a spark of urgency igniting in his chest. That promise, what promise? The darkness around him suddenly grew frantic, lashing out in desperation as Paul reached into the essence of those sweet memories, gathering them like fireflies in his mind. "I will remember," he roared, pouring every ounce of frustration and determination into those memories. "You won't take me down." The shadows shrieked in a collective rage, retreating for an instant, but it was an opening. Panting, Paul lunged forward, drawing the light toward him as he reached for the heart of the shadows. He could feel resistance, could feel the smothering weight of despair trying to drown him, but there it was, the anchors of hope from his memories. He gripped them tight, the room shook as if the very foundation was at war. Would he stand tall, or would he crumble under the pressure? Just then, the ground ruptured beneath him, a deep chasm forming. Panic clawed at his throat. Was this the end? Or a beginning? He could still hear her voice inside the storm, a haunting echo. Fight. Fight for the truth. And then he realized, with a sickening mixture of fear and glee, this moment held everything. The shadows, they feared not his light but the potential of what they might reveal, and in that instant, he knew he had to choose, leap into the abyss or remain shackled in uncertainty. What lay beyond? Would the truth liberate him, or was the cost greater than he imagined? With a heart pounding in his chest and the shadows clinging to him like a second skin, Paul felt the imperceptible pull of fate urging him forward. The chasm beneath his feet loomed, dark and intimidating, but the echo of the girl's voice, the flames of the past, fueled a fire within him. She wanted him to see, to remember, to rise. "Leap!" he shouted against the wind of swirling darkness. With one powerful leap, he dove into the void. Time stretched in that breathless moment, suspended in the air as if everything slowed down. Faces from his childhood whirled around him, their expressions caught between fear and hope. He felt the weight of their pain, their laughter, and their sorrow intertwining with his own. As he fell, he grasped at memory's moments of pure, unbridled joy, days spent running through sunlit fields, shared stories over family dinners, and laughter echoing through hallways suffocated by grief. Each one pulsed with a vibrant light, illuminating the abyss around him that he landed like thunder on soft earth, surrounded by muted colors and a strange tranquility that made him catch his breath. He was no longer in the suffocating attic but standing in a lush garden overflowing with blossoms. The air sang with life, filling him with warmth. At the center stood a majestic oak, its branches wide and welcoming, standing as a testament to resilience, and there, beneath that tree, was the girl. Her presence radiated strength, her eyes held the weight of 1,000 memories and yet, the unyielding light of hope. "You did it!" she exclaimed, a smile breaking like dawn through clouds. I don't understand." Paul stumbled forward, confusion painting his brow. "Where are we?" "This is the memory you fought for," she explained, her voice steady and calming. "A space where truth can flourish, untainted by darkness. You finally faced what held you back." He looked around, breathing in the sweetness of freedom, the scent of possibilities. "But the shadows? Are they gone?" "For now," she replied, her smile fading slightly. "They will always be lingering, but you have the power to confront them, to remind yourself of what light looks like." With newfound clarity, Paul nodded. The shadows had been feeding on his fear, his unwillingness to embrace the truth lingering within him. Here, in this serene place, the weight of legacy settled less heavily on his soul. He could rewrite his narrative, honor the pain of the past while welcoming a brighter future. "Thank you," he whispered, a swell of gratitude filling him. "For standing by me. But remember," she warned gently, "you must carry this light back with you. Truth can be daunting, but it can also be liberating. You are never alone in this fight." The garden brightened as if resonating with his resolve. His heart swelled with hope, but he felt an urgency. The world he left behind was still entangled in darkness. "I have to go back," he declared, determination lacing his voice. "I need to break the chains." She nodded, a knowing glimmer in her eyes. "Then let us show them the power of our truth." Together, they clasped hands, and in unison, they shouted, "We will remember." The landscape began to shimmer, the garden folding inward as if inviting the darkness to dance. With trust and unity, they plunged back through swirling colors, until they were thrust into the attic once more. Paul opened his eyes, finding himself standing again before the chest, the shadows writhing at the corners like restless spirits. But this time, he was no longer afraid. The whispers had turned into a melody, a symphony of truth. "Let us show them," he muttered fiercely, crouching to gather what remained of the notes scattered on the floor. "We will reclaim our stories." As he rose to face the darkness surrounding him, he felt an unbreakable bond with a legacy that was now his, not something to hide from, but to embrace. With fiery conviction, he stepped into the shadows, a beacon of light piercing through the oppressive veil. His voice rang clear and confident as he declared, "You don't own me." The shadows screeched, recoiling from the flame of his spirit. "You will no longer hold power over me. I am the keeper of my truth." The darkness surged forward, wild with fury. But it was no match for the strength ignited within Paul. The memories flared brightly, and with each snap of those fragments a surge of laughter, a moment of love, a scar of pain. Light exploded, cascading outward like ribbons, illuminating every corner of the attic. The shadows writhed in anguish, unraveling under the weight of his resolve. They began peeling away, their ghastly forms dissolving into wisps of smoke, chased off by the brightness of Paul's unyielding truth. As the last tendrils of darkness evaporated, the attic transformed, filled with light and the echoes of laughter that spoke of history reclaimed. Paul turned to see the figure of the girl smiling at him, radiating pride and warmth. "We did it." He laughed, pure joy flooding his veins. "We faced them." Together, she winked, her form slowly fading. "Wait." Paul grasped, desperation rising in him. "Do I really have to say goodbye?" "Not goodbye," Paul, she reassured, just a beginning. Carry this truth forward, it lives in you now. Your journey doesn't end here. And she vanished, leaving Paul in the center of a joyous cacophony of light and laughter, made strong by the stories that shaped him. With renewed strength, Paul stepped into the day, ready to face the world outside. He would tell their stories, confront the shadows that lingered in every heart, and honor the truth that connected them all. No longer a prisoner of his past, but a powerful voice for the future, and just before he stepped out into the light, Paul turned, glancing back at the attic one last time, a smile breaking across his face. I will remember, he whispered softly, knowing that he had broken the chains, forever setting his ancestors free. You need to subscribe now and join this incredible journey. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm so we can share more exclusive stories together. And don't forget to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful ending. Let us keep the truth alive.